It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, May 31st. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is going to get math in today. Talking about the cap.
Math, my favorite.
Yeah, it's a conundrum for the Flyers. We're going to work on that. Plus, we're going to answer your mailbag questions all on today's show.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube. We're now on the SiriusXM app. Basically, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thanks to those subscribed over on YouTube. We're getting closer, man. Thank you so much from us to all of you who are subscribed out there. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube. We're getting close to giving away a prize, so stay tuned for that. Before we dig into some salary cap math, the coaching carousel around the NHL continues to turn. Andrew Brunette is now going to coach the Preds. We've got Spencer Carberry, who's the assistant in Toronto, who's now going to coach the Washington Capitals. We're hearing rumors about Laviolette going to the Rangers, which would track, it's another team in the Metro he hasn't coached yet.
Yeah, I don't think that one's done yet, though. I think they're still waiting to see what happens with Sheldon Keefe and with the GM situation. I think that's why they haven't done it yet. So that one, I think, still a little up in the air. Carberry was a no-brainer, like with Hershey.
Right.
He was there with Hershey, so that makes sense. And, yeah, I think Brunette, that's a good spot for him with Nashville, but I do think this is a tough way to let John Hine go because, like all the chairs may be filled by the time he even gets to interview. And that's the tough one here.
Yeah, I think so as well. Plus, we have a Stanley Cup final finally set. Vegas finally got it done. So we will see a Florida Panthers Vegas Golden Knights Stanley Cup final coming up starting Saturday.
Yeah,
we'll talk more
Friday.
Cool. We will talk more about that as it starts up. Heading into our discussion of the Flyers salary cap, this is one of the biggest challenges that Danny Briere has right now. When you're trying to do a rebuild and, you do need flexibility in the salary cap to work with because there are a lot of moving pieces and parts here. And, if you're trying to work in, taking on maybe some veteran salaries that other teams want to dump that are temporary while to bridge the gap, to build assets, right? Just the thing that the Flyers were doing and having to give up picks to other teams to take players. In a rebuild situation, the Flyers should be able to do the reverse and build assets, but they can't right now because of the lack of cap space. And to me, that's one of the biggest problems about the situation, right?
Yeah, the cap's tough. I mean, neither of us are capologists. We're not cap experts. We're not Brandon Pridham. We didn't invent the cap. It's hard. It's very hard, and it changes every day. So we're not going to attempt that part of it. We're just doing like a big overview of, hey, these are some things that maybe if they did, they could start to clear immediate. Like some of my things are not immediate. This is just a plan that I have. So, some of it you still have to take it on the chin for another year or two. Some of it you can get out of a little bit. Some of it, so we'll go through those steps.
So I think the first thing we have to talk about is, what kind of plan should the Flyers put forth in order to solve this problem? We're talking how many years should it take so that they're basically leveled out and can start signing top free agents again, where, some of the younger players or maybe a Cutter Gauthier is in contract mode by then. A Tyson Forster is in bridge deal mode by then. And you want to be able to sign all of those guys. And so, how many years, Russ, do you think it'll take to get to the Flyers being in a good position cap wise?
I think they're thinking 3. That's what I think. By year 3, I feel like they'll think they're on the right track and are doing things the right way. And is that possible? Sure, it's possible. Uh, it's not like likely, but it's definitely possible. So, the Flyers are always like when they get in these, I've covered them long enough to know when they get in these situations, they go one way very aggressively and then they go the other way very aggressively. But this
Mhm.
way, to be very aggressive is hard because a lot of things are out of your control.
No, absolutely. And, it starts with, you know, LTIR issues and like Ryan Ellis that they're in right now and possibly Cam Atkinson. We don't know what's going on there. And so, in order to be able to fit them on the roster and then put them on LTIR, like that puts a huge dent in your cap up front for this year.
Yeah, like I heard Al Morgani the other day when a caller called in and asked him about Cam Atkinson. He's like, "Well, he's doing better. He has feeling in his hand and everything, and all of that's great. I am really happy for him. Still doesn't mean he could, be even a second liner yet in this league every day. We don't know what's going to happen when he starts taking hits. We don't know what's going to happen when he plays 20 games, how he's going to feel. We don't know any of that yet. And other guys with that neck fusion, that one has happened a lot in the NHL, that operation, and it always seems to take away some offense. So, we're going to have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah, and so I think that it's going to be a big consideration going into next season if you take into consideration the LTR candidates that they have right now in those two. You're looking at about 14 million left in the cap, which you know could sound like a decent amount of money, except you think that the roster size currently with signed players, there's still 8 spots left to fill.
Right. Yeah,
So
it's a
that
lot
is
of
not
spots.
a lot of money at all.
No, and even if they were to get LTIR money, like let's say for Cam, I believe it doesn't matter until the season starts. So
Yep.
you could only run 10% over the cap in the summer. So you don't get all that money to spend in the summer. So that's another, facet of that. So they'd probably rather have the player than have to worry about the LTIR. LTIR is helpful for clubs when they have too many good players. The Flyers don't have enough good players. So you're right. They've got to fill slots.
Yep. So this is year one of that plan, Russ. So in order to create more space, in order to have the cap plus 10% to potentially have like 2 or 3 players in that LTIR fund, what do you do year one?
All right. So, looking things over, um, I still have to mention a couple of longer term things just to say why I don't think it works year one. So, trading Kevin Hayes year one, very unlikely. Uh, if you do, you're not going to get the return you want.
Yeah.
If you do, you're going to have to retain a lot and a lot more than the way I want to do it. The only downside is, yeah, John Tortorella will have to play with him and just be professional about it. And they were last year. I'm assuming they can get through another one because if they can get through the 24-25 season, would be a better way to trade him. Whether you trade him before that season begins at the draft or you trade him at that deadline. I think ultimately, if you get another 54-point season out of him this year, there's a chance you'll be able to trade him at the draft, but you'll definitely be able to trade him at the deadline. And at
Yeah.
that point, you won't have to retain anything. I think you'll actually be able to trade him. You trade him now, you're going to have to retain for 2 or 3 years. Uh, People have told me that they've heard the Flyers might do it for 3 years, but that's like $2 million a year. That's dead money for the next 3 years. I don't love that. This year they're not competing, so I don't care if he's on the roster. Unless I'm getting blown away with an offer, which again for Kevin Hayes, I can't imagine I am. I'm just going to let that one roll for a while. Tony DeAngelo, I will eat some cap money to trade him now. So the same way that he was signed by the Flyers last year, I'm going to
Mhm.
trade him at the draft this year. And I'm going to go to all the teams and say, who wants an offensive defenseman? Let's talk turkey. And I'll eat a million and a half in order to get back a good draft pick or some sort of prospect. So D'Angelo is the first one on the hit list.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on, and it's what I would do as well. Because with 3 years left on Kevin Hayes's deal, I mean, that's just the smart way about it because no team is gonna take on that salary for more than 2 years,
Right.
guaranteed, and you're right, he's a serviceable player. He's
Right.
better than a serviceable player.
Right.
Let's be honest. He is better than that. And so I think that having him on the team and having a veteran like that on the team, especially if they end up with a lot of young guys, would be a good way to start. And I don't think that is going to be possible. The problem then lies, what do we do year two, continuing year one? What are the options? And then year two, year three. And we are going to get into that part of it coming up next.
Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. Right now, new customers can get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. I'll tell you right now, I would take the Miami Heat. I kind of like Denver as a fun team in here. If you want to just bet like things about Jokic, what he might do in the game, that's fine. But it's kind of I think the Heat may have overcome what they needed to. So we'll see. The best parts about getting on FanDuel are that they have great promotions every day, a safe and secure app, and you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, continuing our conversation about the cap. So now we know we're not going to trade Kevin Hayes. We are going to attempt to trade Tony D'Angelo. And let's just say, we have to eat 1.5 to 2 million.
Right.
All right. What do we do next?
So what we do next is we see the interest in Travis Konechny. We test that at the draft as well. Before the draft, at the draft. We're trying to get more picks in this draft. So for Konechny, you could hopefully get either that other first or a second and a roster player or a second and a prospect who's getting ready to break into the NHL. That's what I'm looking for Travis Konechny. If I don't get that, he stays on the team. But that's the next one I have to explore because there is value there. And that's something where, you have to look at trying to maximize. I know people like him, but the thing is his contract's going to be up in a couple of years and you don't know what your situation will be at that point, whether you'll continue to want to pay him or not. So you worry about it then. You could always re-sign him 3 years from now if that's what you want.
Yeah, I think, it would pain me very much to see him go just from a output perspective and from, what he could provide. And I think, he is again one of those guys that you partner him up with one of these younger wingers.
Mhm.
He's going to make them better too. And so that is partially where my concern is, but if your concern is only clearing the cap, I mean, you got to listen to whatever offers are out there, right?
Yeah, in 25, 26, who's to say you can't re-sign him? But right now, you're going to save the player you're going to put in his place will be like $1 million player or less. You're going to save $4.5 million on the cap. Plus, you're going to get talent and or picks or both. If you could do that, you have to do it.
Yeah, and I think the other, option here is looking at Joel Farabee, who makes a similar amount of money. Now, he's not as good, and making 5 million for Joel Farabee, that's going to be a tougher sell.
It is a tougher sell. Me personally, I probably have to hold on to Farabee right now because I have to believe he's going to have a rebound season from the neck because he rushed
Right.
himself back. If he does have that rebound season, we can talk about it next season. His value will be up, but he's of the age where you might be able to keep him all the way through. If he gets back to like 90% of Joel Farabee, then just keep him. The 5 million, I don't think will be that bad.
And then, beyond that, I think it's very unfortunate, but Nick Delorier has a no trade clause. And it's just why?
It's
Because that would
mind-boggling, man.
mind-boggling 1.75. I know it's like not that much money, but every little bit counts here. And then, I just don't think they're trading Scott Lawton. I think that would
No.
be, a good option. I think he's very sellable for what
He
he
is.
is, but they're just not going to trade him. And that's, where the difficulty lies for me, because if you look on the defensive side of things, Provy is really the only option to trade.
Uh-huh.
Has a no trade clause in his contract, so that makes it more difficult.
And he didn't do
Um,
well this year at
and
all,
he
really.
didn't do well this year. And then Rasmus Ristolainen makes too much money for what he is. So again, that's a
Yeah.
retained salary situation. Now I still might do it though, because even if you're retaining 1 million on that, but I wouldn't do it retaining more than 1 million.
No, I'm kind of against the retaining. Like,
It is,
I'm
but
gonna
it's
keep
long. That's the problem. It's 4 he's a Kevin Hayes situation where like 2 years from now you can do it. This year, I don't know.
yeah, this year makes it hard. You have to answer, you look around about the Provorov situation, but you have to have a plan in return. So if you trade Provorov, yeah, though, what does he make? Like 4.5, something like that. You're gonna save
No, he makes
oh
6.75.
6.75. I don't know why I was thinking 4.5. Yeah,
He
thank you.
did in his bridge deal, but
Oh,
now
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, my brain reverted to that. Well, okay. So you see, I mean, he's got a shorter term deal, but he could be a big benefit to the club because yes, while you could save money by getting rid of him, you definitely could get some value here. Who are you going to put there? So, as an example, if I make the trade, let's say I make it with St. Louis, right? And maybe I get Scott Perinovich, who, looked good in the World Championships. He's 24. I think he's about ready to play in the NHL. He's very close. Um, he's not going to be playing in the Ivan Provorov spot, and neither is Cam York. So you're probably going to have to put Ristolainen in there. And who knows what will happen when you do that, but that's probably what you're doing. Then you're putting Ristolainen probably with York, and then Zamula probably comes into the game because I think he's just an easier to plug in right now since Adard, I think, needs a little more work. And then, you add Perinovich in there, and you can get by with this season. Like, you're not worried about where you fall in the standings this season. So if you want to do that, you could do that. It's not my number one thing to do because I just feel like if you want York to continue to develop, it's good to have Provorov there, and I would keep him there because he's not a detriment. But I'll listen.
Yeah, so it sounds like based on all this, we've only gained maybe $4 or $5 million total on the cap
So far.
so far. So then what do we do next trade deadline and off season?
Well, hold on. I mean, there is one other option,
Mhm.
Carter Hart option. We don't know where he stands. I know they say nice things about him, and Dan has said nice things about him. We don't know where the Hockey Canada thing stands. But let's say that does get settled before the draft, right? I'll put Carter Hart up on the bid block and see what I get. There is a goaltending shortage in this league. He makes pretty good money. So that is another way of possibly doing it. I'm gonna have to get a goalie in return. Whatever team I'm trading with, you'll give me one of your prospect goalies. And I also want a first round pick and a prospect. Something like that. Some sort of package. If you need like a prospect for me to balance it out, fine. I'll give you somebody. But I'm looking for something like that. If I could get that, I have to consider it. Again, I don't think Hart, even if he stays with the Flyers, is going to sign an 8-year deal. I think he and his agent are going to look at it and say, look, we don't know where this is going, but we'll sign a 4-year deal. I don't think he would sign more than that. So this way he could be a free agent again at some point while he's still young and still have a chance to win in case the Flyers aren't ready to win. I think that's a possibility. So you have to look at that whole platter there.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that, especially if you're getting a goalie in return and a
Mhm.
1A goalie in return, that you're going to clear any cap space in a deal like that. I
Well, you
think
would. Like, let's say, no, I'm just going to make up a team. Like, let's say it's St. Louis, right? Let's say they've traded Jordan Binnington and the Flyers could get Joel Hofer from him. He doesn't make a lot of money. Now, that's not going to
is
happen.
he
But
a 1A?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's definitely a 1A. But there are those guys in the league. Like, who's to say that, let's say you catch Carolina on a day where they say, hey, we might move Kochekov. We've seen enough. He's a 1A for me. Those kinds of guys, they don't make a lot of money. They make a little bit of money. So like Kochekov's a little bit more. But there's guys that haven't really gotten a chance yet that are still on ELCs that you could give a chance. And that's more of what I'm looking for anyhow.
All right. So that adds like maybe 2 million.
Yeah, 2.5.
All right. So then moving forward to next year trade deadline and next off season, the Flyers still should not be adding to the cap at this point in any significant way, correct?
Not a significant way, but you have to keep some of your younger talent. So I'm going to give Kate 2 to 3 years. I'm going to give Frost 2 to 3 years on bridge deals. I have to do it. I can't lose that talent, even if they're not there long term. Kate's will be. Even if you're on the edge about Frost, you got to keep him. I might do Allison for another 1 year plug, just because now that I'm rebuilding, fine, he's good with the younger guys. I probably have to do that to fill those spots. And of course, I don't want to give Kate's a massive contract yet. I got to make sure, and I don't want to give anybody a massive contract. So all of those guys are getting that. Nick Sealer, the most I'm going to give him is 2 years. And I'm really going to probably just give him 1. So that's the other aspect of all this.
I don't know. I'm giving Nick Sealer any deal after the one he's on, but I think that
I know, but it's a possibility because
it is. Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I am giving that money to Frost, for sure, and to Cates. So, and depending on how Cates does, he may require a little bit more money. So much more to talk about with this. We're going to wrap that up, plus answer your mailbag questions coming up next. All right. So looking year 2, year 3 for the salary cap for the Flyers, that is where I think in year 3, you should, in theory, have room to start signing bigger free agents.
So year 3, you're going to hold on to your hat here, because at that point, I'm going to know what Sean Couturier is. And if he doesn't have much value because he's just sort of like turned into a second or third line player because of these back injuries, I'm buying him out. Like, that's what I'm going to have to do.
Yeah.
And it will hurt to do it because he's a great guy. But this is the downside of it if he doesn't do well. I'm giving him 2 more years, but I'm not giving him any more than that. I'm willing to, because he's good to have around for the rebuild and he's good in the locker room. But there's a point where he's got to produce. And if he's not a number 1 or number 2 anymore, and let's say Cates is my 2 and Frost is my 1, and maybe Gauthier is your 3 to start. I don't know if he will be. I think he might be a winger. But either way, sorry, Sean, this is the way we're kind of going now.
Yeah, and he's under contract through 2029-30, which, right. Oof, that is a big
contract. It wasn't so bad when he signed it, but now it's prohibitive, and that's why I'm giving him 2 more years. Yeah. But that's it. Now, if in those 2 years he does great, fine, I'll keep him. But otherwise, I got to buy him out.
All right. So hopefully that is what will do the trick to turn things around to be able to sign other free agents that could be available to supplement hopefully a lot of young guys who have hit in the draft, and we'll get a good player this year. We'll hopefully get a good player next year, and the timing should be right.
Yeah, I mean that's what you're shooting for there.
Yep. All right, a few of your mailbag questions before we wrap up for the day. Michael on YouTube says, sounds like you would take Benson over Leonard for his intangibles. Do you see Leonard as a McKinnon light, not as skilled, but a rhino on skates? What NHL comps do you see in them?
I mean, I really don't give out comps. Leonard plays really differently than a lot of these other guys. Then you might look at McKinnon, but he doesn't have the speed of McKinnon, and you might look at Brendan Gallagher in Montreal, and there's some of his game that he plays like that, but he's bigger than Brendan and stronger, so there's that, and he's got a better shot. So, but he is a guy that's dependent on getting to the net. Like that's where he's going to score most of his points. And so, yeah, I wouldn't call McKinnon light. I wouldn't take him over Benson because Benson, I just feel, is a supreme playmaker, tremendous two-way player, which again, the Flyers don't have a lot of two-way forwards. And Leonard's two-way is good too. That's not like that's not an issue. But Benson is just on a different level. What he could do two-way and what he could do passing-wise, and he could still score. And I, like I mentioned on the other show, if I could lengthen his stride, he's going to get faster too. So I still have to go with Benson. Leonard's fine, but I would still go with Benson.
Yeah, this whole discussion and the other questions we're gonna answer for y'all are along this general theme, which is a huge debate right now. I think
Yeah,
in the Flyers fandom, in just the world of the Flyers, and Benson versus Leonard is, I think, the crux of this conversation, right? Where I think Zach Benson has a tremendous skill set. We talked about him on yesterday's show. Go back and listen if you haven't. um, Ryan Leonard is a very good player. But
really, really
is
good.
he really good? And like you said, but he's a different kind of player than Benson. And like you said, and so which type of player is going to be better for the Flyers in 2 to 3 years when they
Right,
hit? And
right.
that's a legitimate question to ask, and there is no 100% correct
No,
answer to that question. But I think if you look at who the Flyers have taken, we have more Leonards than we have Bensons. And so
right.
I personally would take Benson. Will the Flyers do that? I don't know. Which leads to Andrew's question and Art's question, which we'll kind of combine into one discussion here. But
Okay.
Andrew says, I'm not from Philly and don't live there, but is the fan base really clamoring for this big, heavy team? Or does the organization not know most of us just want to see talented players? And then Art asks, I have a general question about the Flyers draft strategy. Will the Flyers sticking to the tall two-way forward and gritty player habit have the fans thinking same team, different day? Do you think they will have a new direction at the draft? This is really this crux of this Flyers conundrum right now, right?
It
It's
is.
like the
And
Flyers have a type. Are they going to move off from that type?
right. So far, we haven't seen any indication that they will move off of that type. Uh, they have all the same people drafting. If you want to say Danny's the new voice, he was at the draft table last year. Now, maybe you want to say he didn't have as big a voice. Okay, but they would have listened to him last year because he was in a position where you would have to listen to him. So I'm not going to give him cut him a break and say, well, it's his first year at the draft. It's not. So, so far, what Brent Flair said was about the bigger player. Now, they did also include faster, and that's fine, but then you're still limiting yourself. When you're trying to find that bigger, faster guy, there's not as many of those. And if heavy means that they could be like Leonard and not be like 6'3", but end up being like barely 6 foot, then that's fine too. But you have to define that. Nobody has defined much here, Rachel. So they're just kind of leaving us to guess. So my guess is they are still going to go for that type because Brent was satisfied with his 6 foot to 6'2" guys that all happened to just be on their board where they were last year. But again, if you have a bias towards that, those are going to be the guys on your board, right? That's just human nature. And then as far as the fan base, I do think there's 30% or more that would like to see the Zach Benson type. And then I think there's the other that doesn't necessarily want to take the chance on the Zach Benson. They just want a guaranteed hit. And even at number 7 of any draft, even a draft this good, the guaranteed hit is always going to be an 80%er, an 85%er. Like there's things that can go wrong, like again, injuries, all those things. So I think when push comes to shove, the Flyers fan actually just acquiesces and says, all right, maybe they didn't take my guy, but I just want this player to be good. I hear that a lot.
Yep. Yep. And that's my question too. And that's where my thought process is going with this, because to me, I see people clamoring for, even if he's smaller, the skilled player who's super fast, great hands, super smart IQ. Sounds like Benson to me, right?
Mhm.
These are the fans that I hear the loudest voices on, because they're sick of this, like, I want just size and grit, right?
Right.
But like Cutter Gauthier is a really good hockey player, and like they went for more of like a size forward
Right.
in that draft,
They
and that
did.
was the choice they made.
And I do want to
And
preface one thing. We're talking about Benson and Leonard because we believe Oliver Moore will be gone.
mhm,
That's why we're saying that. And we know Will Smith will be gone. So I just want
right.
to just spell that out.
Right. And so to me, I really want to know, does the base want a Zach Benson type because we missed out on Cole Caulfield and because of the selection they made last year? Not a bad selection, again, just a choice.
Right.
And, does the fan base want the smaller, faster player that has a bigger upside? Or do they want the best of the Flyers type? And I'm air quoting that there if you're
Yeah.
just listening. And we just want the best possible player of the Flyers type that we know they're going to pick.
I mean, the
Are
Flyers
they
seem pretty safe, and Leonard's the safe pick.
right? Exactly. And like again, would not complain about Ryan Leonard. I think he's
Mhm.
fantastic. He's just not the type of player I think the Flyers need to pick right now. And I want to know if the fan base, so out there, if you're listening, let us know. Do you want a Benson type because you think it's high risk, high reward? Or do you want the best of who you think the Flyers are going to pick from?
It's a good
I
question.
think it's a really good question. And so I'm curious that like outside of my bubble, if you're listening or watching over on YouTube, comment and let us know like which type like are you picking your who you want them to pick based on who you want in a vacuum or who you think the Flyers are most likely to pick and you think that's the best of that type. Please let us know cuz I am genuinely curious
Mm.
about how people feel out there. All right, that will do it for today's show. Again, lots more to come leading up to the draft. We're going to talk about another seventh overall option, Andrew Crystal, on tomorrow's show, as well as a third round pick option in Gavin McCarthy. So tune in to that. If you want your question answered on the show, you can tweet us at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail, or you can comment over on YouTube. I am Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.